On this episode, we visit Columbus, Ohio for the Safe Routes to School National Conference. Then we learn about the Columbus Area Pedestrian Safety Committee. We talk with a city council member in Morgantown, West Virginia about walkability. Finally, we visit the Northern West Virginia Center for Independent Living. Stay tuned.
We're in Columbus, Ohio, talking with Cassandra Cedro with the Safe Routes to School National Partnership. What is the partnership?
At the National Partnership, we're a network of more than 800 organizations that advance bicycling and walking to school and in everyday life, as well as active schools and healthy communities overall.
What's been going on here in Columbus the last 3 days?
We have had advocates and champions from all over the nation that work in the Safe Routes to School space, talking to each other, learning from each other, meeting things, sharing ideas, and moving us forward.
Basically, it was your national conference.
Yeah, yes.
So where'd the idea for Safe Routes to School come from?
It's not the U.S. It actually came from overseas and was started. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary. But the idea of kids walking and biking to school is as old as we've known it. We've just created systems that get in the way.
What are those systems? What are the obstacles for children walking to school? When I grew up, I thought that's what everybody did, but it doesn't seem that way anymore.
It doesn't. We've changed to a culture that really prioritizes cars. So we have the roadways are not safe. We have barriers of infrastructure. We have challenges with crime sometimes, although the perception of that is usually a lot higher than the actual reality of kids being safe in that element. And then sometimes it's the policies, and sometimes it's what's been put in place in the local community that doesn't quite make sense.
And there's federal legislation that's had an impact on this. How'd that happen?
So Deb Hubsmith, who was the founder of the National Partnership, was responsible for really spearheading the Safe Routes to School movement along with many, many other champions. But she worked with Congressman Oberstar to establish legislation that provided funding on an ongoing basis for Safe Routes to School through state departments of transportation. So we're fortunate to have a funding stream that actually helps schools make improvements, provide education and programs for students, and encouragement, as well as looking at enforcement in their space.
How does that federal program work, getting out to the states and the localities?
That's a lot of where we come in, because it tends to be or needs to be a local advocacy effort. Someone has to make a plan. Someone has to request that funding. And if there's not a very proactive Department of Transportation, sometimes they take care of it. But it's applying for national dollars to run programs. And so as the National Partnership, we're often in the middle trying to bring people together, trying to help people do applications, trying to secure more funding for the safe routes locally.
How varied are the local safe routes efforts? I mean, is there sort of a typical one, or circumstances so much different in different places?
It's, we had a great conversation with Attendee this morning about this. It's really, there's a template of what should exist, what establishes safety, what's good for kids, but it's an entirely customized approach, because you may have different parent support, you may have different school support, you may have different infrastructure, but that doesn't make it impossible. It just makes it a different conversation of assessing where you are.
How's it going to benefit our children if we're successful and they do have a safe and comfortable way to walk to school?
What we know from research about physical activity is if you learn it, if it's your way of life, it becomes your way of life as an adult. We learn how to move our bodies early on. We learn that we walk places. We learn that that's what we prefer, and our muscles get conditioned to that, and we operate more effectively that way. Safe Routes to School starts that with kids early, and it helps them meet the 60 minutes of physical activity that we all know that they need to thrive and learn.
So you're just wrapping up this conference. You get to take a little break now, and then you get to work on what you do next. What's the future of Safe Routes to School? Anything new coming up that people should watch out for?
I think what's most exciting for us is the work we've done in the last 3 or 4 years around equity. The Safe Routes to School movement was put out there, and systems were put in place, and now we get to go deeper into communities that really need it. We initially focused more, I think, on communities where they were driving, and so we wanted them to walk or bike. But there's many, many low-income communities where there's no choice, and where it's truly about making the circumstances of that walk to school or bike ride to school safe, and where the kids feel confident and secure in their own environment. And that's where we're really taking a deep dive and looking at where we can have an impact. We want to go to the communities that need it most and to work with them to do what they would like to see in their communities for the safety and health of their children.
We're in Columbus, Ohio, talking with Jordan Whistler with MORPC. What does MORPC stand for?
MORPC stands for the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. MORPC is the local MPO for the Columbus area and also serves as a coalition of local governments here within the Central Ohio region.
And what is CAPS?
CAPS is the Columbus Area Pedestrian Safety Committee.
And who all is on that committee, and what do you do?
So there's a number of individuals that serve on that committee, and they range from local representatives to state representatives to local concerned citizens, and we discuss issues within the Central Ohio area related to pedestrian safety and initiatives that we can partner on and collaborate on to improve the safety of walking and traversing the Central Ohio region. And that's not just limited to walking, it's also bicycling as well. CAPS is out of the Safe Communities program here in Franklin County, which involves a number of committees, CAPS being one of them.
And what contribution is MORPC able to make to the CAPS committee?
Sure. So every year, MORPC pulls together regional crash data analysis where we look at crash trends that we're seeing in the region, what some of those various contributing factors are, and that's not just limited to vehicular crashes, that includes pedestrian and bicycle, non-motorized crashes as well. So we try to identify some of those trends that we're seeing and really try to bring that back to an organization like CAPS. We're able to contribute in a significant way to that conversation of what can be done. So again, we're able to identify some of those trends. We're able to look where there may be opportunities for improvements and help develop and collaborate on projects that we feel will be able to increase the safety of pedestrians here in Central Ohio.
And when you take a good look at pedestrian crash data in a city like Columbus, what sort of problems do you see? What are the solutions that you can be applied to those problems?
Some of those problems relate to just street design in general and the ability of people to get around safely on foot. Central Ohio doesn't lack high-speed arterials, and that is surely an issue here in the city of people trying to navigate areas that may not have adequate facilities, or those facilities may be along high-speed corridors. So improvements in facility design. There's also education components. We see about a 50-50 split in pedestrian at-fault crashes and vehicular at-fault crashes, and we really try to focus our strategies on both sides of that equation, but just ensuring that we're educating both pedestrians and motorists on their expectations in terms of behavior when traversing the streets here in Central Ohio.
What sort of, when you look in pedestrian behavior, driver behavior, what sort of mistakes are people making that you hope to address through education?
So failure to yield is definitely one that we're seeing on the motorist side. So pedestrians are legally within the right-of-way. They're doing what they should be. However, the motorist is failing to either slow down sufficiently or stop on that part, encroaching on crosswalks, and again, where pedestrians should be, motorists are not necessarily respecting that. So that's one issue we're seeing. Pedestrians being termed, at least within our crash reports, as being illegally in the roadway or in an area where they're crossing that either they're doing that in an inappropriate manner or doing it at the wrong time as another such issue that we're seeing. So again, those education efforts on both sides to accurately portray the laws of being and traversing, being a pedestrian in Columbus and moving around Columbus, and also what the expectations are on motorists who are driving heavy vehicles at high speeds down roadways.
And close companion to education is enforcement. Have you been able to do much enforcement in this area?
Yeah, so we partner, and things, again, that come out of CAPS are really partnerships and collaborations on various projects. Things that we've done historically in the past involve pedestrian and motorist safety stings. So up in the OSU area and as well as downtown, we'll partner with the Columbus Police Department to educate pedestrians who are crossing in an appropriate manner, or again traversing the streets in an appropriate manner, and also motorists when they're not obeying the correct laws as well. So CPD is definitely a great partner in that sort of educational effort. Those efforts typically don't result in ticketing and offenses. However, sometimes they do. Those sorts of efforts are really designed to be educational in nature and inform both pedestrians and motorists of their expectations. And again, that's really a partnership. So you have CPD working with MORPC and Columbus Public Health among other agencies to develop education materials and work with the general public.
And this is the sort of thing where you expect to see changes over time as the infrastructure improves or people get better educated. Are you seeing any changes over time?
Well, we hope that our efforts aren't in vain, that we are making fundamental changes to the system to increase safety. And we often talk about the 4 and 5 E's of safety here in Ohio and Central Ohio particularly. So there's a lot of different partners working on various aspects and working on those various aspects together. We don't believe that there's one silver bullet to this issue, that it's more systemic, that we really need to attack it on a lot of different fronts. So you see a lot of different projects occurring, not just here in Central Ohio that involve pedestrian safety, but also statewide. And there's, I believe, an increasing emphasis on trying to make not only this region safe, but the state and nation safe for pedestrians as well.
We're talking with Jenny Saline with the Morgantown City Council. Why is walkability important to a place like Morgantown?
In order to be competitive as a university city, in order to keep our current residents happy, they speak up and tell us that it's important to them, and in order to attract new professors, new medical people to our community, it's very important that we be walkable, that people are asking for walking, people are having walking campaigns, they're speaking up more and more about how important it is that people can walk when they're going about their day-to-day activities.
And do people come in and say, I want a walkable city, or they complain about a sidewalk or a crosswalk? What do you actually hear from them?
Well, we actually hear from them. For instance, we're standing right across from a construction project, and as somebody was just coming into a board and commission meeting, they said, gee, they've blocked off the sidewalk. Couldn't they have, left a little bit so that people could still walk here? As we're designing new projects, people are talking about specific intersections and how to make sure that they're walkable. One other project that we're working on currently, when a new building is going in, they're looking for how it could better connect the city infrastructure to the rail trail. So we have a roadway, and it's very hard to connect to our rail trail, and so people are looking for all of those important connections so that we really have a grid and a framework for people to walk on.
And you mentioned your rail trail. What sort of trail system do you have here in the city?
So right now we have about 50-mile system, not completely in the city limits, but it's connected to a 50-mile system. Eventually we'll connect up to Pittsburgh, we'll connect to Parkersburg, in the western part of our state, and so we'll be part of a very, very large network. But right now, we've got about 50 miles, and it inches along every year a few miles to the south and to the north, and also up another creek we have a trail, and so that trail is going to get longer every year. So we keep making improvements.
And your citizens are eager to get access to those trails?
Yes, they're very eager to get access to those trails. We have an incredible number of 5K races, half-mile races. We have a Morgantown marathon that makes use of our city streets and a little bit on the trail, which is really neat. They made a point of, we have 7 wards in the city of Morgantown, and we have a Morgantown marathon that takes advantage of all of the 7 wards, which is very, very nice feature. It was new last year and will continue this year.
And what sort of challenges do you have trying to get a sidewalk system into a city like this?
We have challenges because we have topography. So we're in the small mountains, small eastern mountains. We're not in the Rocky Mountains, but we are not built on the flat. We're built onto a hillside, and so we have topographic challenges where sometimes we can only put a sidewalk on one side of the street because the other side of the street, is a sheer cliff. And so we definitely have challenges and just work very hard to overcome those.
And do you find the other members of the city council, are they hearing the same thing from their constituents, that walkability is important?
I think that pretty much all of us are neighborhood oriented, and all of us hear from people in each of our wards that walkability is important. I think that each council member has maybe a different perspective on how it is important relative to other issues, but I think we all hear uniformly that walkability is important in Morgantown.
And what can you do as a city, and what do you have to rely on the state and the state DOT to accomplish?
Well, some of our main arteries are along state routes. And so when we want to have a sidewalk in those kinds of areas, we need to work with our division of highways. And it's sometimes is a challenge because they have limited funding, and when they're looking at a city street, they're not looking at it quite in the same way. They're more looking at how are they going to move automobiles. We have applied to Division of Highways for money for sidewalks along some of these corridors, and it has been approved and installed. So we have had some nice successes with the Division of Highways, and we look forward to more successes. One thing that's happened the last couple years is we have an MPO that looks at regional transportation planning, and we've passed complete streets in the city of Morgantown, and so we've worked on some transportation corridors, and specifically corridors that go right through the center of our town, and trying to make sure that we're looking at it as a complete street. So of course that would include sidewalks and other walking infrastructure, and that's something that's newly being done the last couple of years. So we passed complete streets in the past, but we're really working now on implementing it right now on the ground, trying to get things through. The other thing that we've done is we've passed safe streets, safe communities fee. So everyone in the city pays $3 every weekend. Everyone who works here pays $3 a weekend, and that is for improvements in the public right-of-way. And so that can include sidewalks and other improvements for walkability. So that will start going into effect this season and also next paving season. So we'll start working on, when we're paving a street, how we're going to make sure that the sidewalk gets included in that.
And your other West Virginia cities also dealing with hills and mountains. Do you trade ideas with them? I mean, is there communication on, they've come up with a good way to handle some of those steep hillsides?
There's definitely some communication. We have statewide groups that work together on some of these issues. We have one group, we have a high incidence of obesity in West Virginia, and so we've been working with a group called Try This, and they have a conference every year in June, and so they talk a lot about walkability and how to make sure that even if there can't be a sidewalk, that there be a shoulder on a road, or other ways that people can find some walking space. So just very practical concerns that we all have, and we definitely do share ideas.
So if I were to come back in a decade and see, well, have they made progress in walkability, what would you like to be able to show me?
Well, one issue that we have is we have a lot of trucks that go through our downtown, and so we've been trying to work on some routes around for those trucks. And so I would love to be able to show you that more of the trucks that, we want trucks to be able to come into town that have business in town, but otherwise there are some routes around. And so we're trying to actually make some improvements to those corridors so that the trucks will route around. And so I'm hoping that you'll see some of that. I'm hoping that you'll see more ADA compliance so that people can cross at the intersections. I'm hoping that you'll see more repaired sidewalks. Also a few new sidewalks.
We're in Morgantown, West Virginia, talking with Jan Derry, who's Executive Director of the Northern West Virginia Center for Independent Living. What is the center?
The center is a community resource center for individuals with disabilities and the community in which we live. Our primary core services are individual and systemic advocacy, skills training, information and referral, community competency building so that the community welcomes and values members with disabilities.
Are there a lot of people with disabilities in West Virginia?
It's hard to imagine, but believe it or not, yes, we are the largest number of people with disabilities per capita in the nation.
What's it like for a pedestrian with disability trying to get around Morgantown?
My honest opinion, it's life-threatening. The infrastructure does not accommodate the large volume of traffic that the university brings to this community. And then recently, within the last few years, there's been significant renovation of University Avenue that has been out of compliance with the standards that the Americans with Disabilities Act regulate for sidewalks and wayfinding, directional signage, as well as timing of stoplights. And it is not accessible. And so as a result of that, individuals with disabilities have significant problems navigating one of the most popular areas of our community. And it is very dangerous for people with vision issues as well as those who use mobility devices to navigate these sidewalks that are built out of code.
Now, what are the key requirements or the key characteristics of a sidewalk that makes it friendly for all pedestrians, but particularly for someone with a disability?
I'm not going to be the best to give you the actual quotes and the degrees of slanting, but basically a minimal amount of slant, as well as the wayfinding directional signage the curb cuts need to lead from one area of access directly to another area of access so that individuals with limited sight or mobility know where to go to find the easy access to the sidewalk. The slant of the sidewalks makes it difficult for people who are using a walker, a wheelchair, or even a mother with a stroller trying to navigate and keep their child out of 5 lanes of traffic. So it's very difficult. Topographically, Morgantown is a challenge. We're built embedded on the side of a mountain. So having flat surfaces would be ideal, but it can't happen when you have to navigate very steep hills. So it's frustrating. But what is done should be done correctly according to code so that it can be, as every incremental change is made, it's made 100% compliance so that everyone can use it.
The ADA has been around for
Since 1990.
quite a few years now. We have guidelines that have been out in one form or another for quite a long time now. You would think, the Department of Transportation or the contractor or somebody would say, "Hey, boss, is the sidewalk supposed to be tilted this bad? Is there supposed to be a pole in the middle of it? What's going wrong?"
I don't know what's going wrong, other than it's very frustrating for the city people, the city of Morgantown, the planners, the code enforcement that have limited influence over the state Department of Highways. They have no ability to influence state road. And so they're working very diligently to try to be in compliance with the roads that the city maintains. But the Department of Highways, I don't understand why a brand new project would not be built 100% in compliance and then has to be retrofitted when enough constituents complain about the lack of access. That costs the state of West Virginia so much more money to have to go back and correct than to do it correctly in the first place.
Then in the future, as the lawsuits are settled, and the state has to spend our taxpayer money fixing what they did wrong in the first place, is that going to get their attention? So you hope this sort of thing doesn't happen again in the future?
I would hope it doesn't happen in the future, but unless it really hits home very hard, I don't think that it really has much of an impact, because it takes a loud voice of the individuals within that community and to stay on top of what's going on and try to take part in public opportunities to provide comments when things are being done, so that it's high on the priority list for individuals to stay conscious of what's going on. And yes, we have a community that's watching, that cares about the lack of compliance with ADA. That just happened recently with a new project that's happening here in town, and they had a public meeting, and myself and several members of the Pedestrian Safety Board were down there talking, reviewing the plans, looking what's happening, and access was a key issue because they're using the philosophy of complete streets. And that construction philosophy ensures compliance with all building standards and code enforcement, as well as pedestrian safety, pedestrian rest areas, bus safety, bicycle safety. So it allows the community to be inclusive of all members of its community if complete streets philosophy is endorsed and used for all construction projects.
Do you see that as an important role for the center here, and sharing your knowledge of what people with disabilities need with the city and with the state to let them know what's needed?
That is one of our primary roles, is community education. We are a resource for that community. Disability doesn't discriminate, whether you're a government official, whether you're the mayor of the city, or whether you own half the city. You could be affected by a disability. And often what happens is for a family member of someone important to be affected by a disability before all of a sudden it matters. And when it affects you personally, it dramatically changes your respect for the law, the Americans with Disabilities Act, when you personally are now facing the barriers that improper construction has created.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.